There was something wrong with the scan. The numbers came back wrong. The material composition was inconsistent. The core readings were distorted. And the I tried 3 times to reprocess it before it shut itself down completely. Not with a malfunction, but with what the Zarn technicians described as something close to fear. Commander Severix was not the kind of leader who panicked. Not in deep space engagements, not during diplomatic collapses, not even when half his fleet had been lost during the orbital entrapment over Jurek 4. And yet now, as he stood in the center of his bridge, surrounded by silent officers and flickering data, he felt something foreign crawl up the back of his neck, something quiet and cold, and deeply ancestral, a feeling he hadn't known since he was a cadet, looking into the eyes of a dying animal for the first time. He didn't pace, didn't shout, didn't demand answers with a clenched jaw like lesser commanders might do when protocol cracked beneath uncertainty. Instead, he stood perfectly still with his arms crossed behind his back, eyes fixed not on the black ship itself, but on the readouts that were slowly falling apart under their own logic. Like the numbers themselves were being bent out of shape by the thing they were trying to describe. Put it on full magnification, he ordered, voice even. No sign of the tightening in his chest. The screen widened, bringing the object into clearer view, and for a moment the bridge felt colder. It was enormous, easily surpassing the mass of a D-class warcruiser, yet it lacked visible thrusters or external power systems. No emissions, no beacon lights, not even the standard ion trail of abandoned human vessels. And yet it moved slightly, with no propulsion, almost like it was adjusting itself minutely, quietly, to remain facing them. It wasn't drifting, it was hovering, and then there was the surface black beyond black, a skin that seemed to drink light rather than reflect it, giving it a depthless, void quality, as if it wasn't a solid object at all, but a shadow of something impossibly massive floating just beyond perception. Thus, the second officer, who had served beside Severix through 7 outer ring deployments and 1 classified survival event, looked visibly rattled as he leaned in toward the data panel. Commander, I ran the material scan twice more while you were reviewing the logs, and it's not responding like any known element, even with quantum resonance compensation. It's not just absorbing signals, it's rewriting them, turning our pings back on us with altered data packets, like it's testing our own scanners through our scans. That's not possible. Severix replied automatically, but he already knew this situation had left the bounds of what was possible. I know, sir. And the weirdest part is, it's not interfering to block us. It's cooperating. Just enough, letting us look, but only at what it wants to show. Severix narrowed his eyes, then stepped closer to the tactical holodisplay, watching as the ship rotated in a slow spin, almost as if inviting them to study its design. There were no weapons, no visible launch tubes, no hangars. And yet, along the mid-ridge of the hull ran a long seam, not cut into the surface, but formed naturally, like a scar. And it pulsed faintly with a dim red glow that shifted every few seconds in a rhythm that made no sense, until Voss enhanced it and froze the pattern on the screen. It's a sequence, he said, nearly whispering. Not energy cycles, it's language. Old human script. Earth Greek symbols mixed with post-colonial code. The camera zoomed in and enhanced it again, drawing out the characters until they read clearly across the central screened HEINDAD. Name hung there like a sentence that didn't need context, like a label that carried its own history, even if no one in the room knew the full story. A few younger officers exchanged confused glances. But the veterans, the ones who had studied the edges of human military history, began to shift uncomfortably in their station. Severix stared at it without blinking, his voice low but firm. That name was redacted from all public archives a century ago. It was never assigned to a ship, officially. Number records, no crew manifest, no construction logs. Those spoke carefully, as if piecing thoughts together while trying not to believe them. But there were whispers, sir. Something about an experimental vessel, not designed for war. Not. Originally, at least, Severix gave a slight nod, remembering now. Faint details from a classified intelligence brief buried in the Dominion's black records. Mentions of a human project that was never meant to engage in interspecies conflict. Something built for a war that hadn't happened yet. Or worse, something waiting for a war that no one else had seen coming. "Why is it here?" he murmured. But the ship offered no answers. Just then, the floor beneath their feet vibrated briefly, subtly, but not from impact, and not from their own systems. It was like something had pulsed through the ship's frame. Not sound, not motion, but a presence vos. Turned back to his terminal, his face drained of color. "Sir? We didn't scan it. Not just now. What are you saying?" "It scanned us." Severix's jaw tightened. "How deep?" Voss didn't answer immediately. When he finally did, his voice was quiet, shaken in a way that did not fit the man all the way. "It broke through 6 firewalls before the system knew it was happening. It pulled everything. Commander? Fleet data, personnel records, engine specs, archived communications from the Council. It saw everything, and then it stopped every display on the bridge shut down in their place. One message appeared in clean, uniform white text on a black background. YOU are not the TJ. No alarms rang. No systems failed. But every officer on the deck stood in stillness, as if the message itself had weight, as if it was pressing down on their lungsvus, stepped back from his station slowly, speaking with measured breath. "Then who is Severix?" Stared at the message, not answering, not right away, because deep down, in the part of his mind that still listened to instinct over protocol, he already knew, and whatever it was that humanity had seen, whatever it was that had birthed the indomitable, it was coming. No one left the bridge hours past, but the crew stayed exactly where they were, watching the message hang in place like it was alive. Like any movement might make it change or react, and no one wanted to be the one who caused that to happen. Severix had issued a silent order to keep the rest of the fleet at a safe distance. Though none of them argued, 3 escort frigates had already gone dark when they tried to scan the black ship independently, and the recovery drones sent after them were still drifting unresponsive, their onboard logs wiped clean. Their memory cores burned from the inside out. Whatever this thing was, it didn't want to be touched, not by machines, not by intention, and certainly not by arrogance now, sitting across from it in orbit like 2 predators sizing each other in. Silence. The Zarn flagship weighted Vos adjusted the spectrum filters, narrowing them to layer composite imaging across the ship's hull. But every pass came back strange, not just unreadable, but irrational, as if the ship wasn't truly there in the way normal matter existed. "There are layers we can't penetrate," he said at last, not hiding the disbelief in his voice. "It's like the outer surface keeps shifting composition the longer we look at it, like it's aware of our observation and is adapting faster than our scans can track." Severix leaned forward slightly, elbows resting on the edge of the control console. His fingers interlaced, his expression sharp. "What is the material? What does the core show?" Vest didn't answer right away, and Severix caught the brief glance he exchanged with another officer across the room, a glance that spoke of uncertainty bordering on fear. "The hull is not entirely physical, Commander," Voss finally said, bringing up the deep echo scan results. "At least not in the way we understand it. The outer layer reads as a hyperdense alloy, but it's behaving like a synthetic neurotissue. It has feedback pulses, responsive triggers, and it reacts like skin." The word hung there longer than it should have. Skin. That was not a term anyone wanted to use for a ship, especially not one this massive, this still, and this old Severix stood upright again. pulling the view out until the whole structure was visible, slowly rotating against the stars, and for the first time, it looked less like a derelict and more like something that had grown out of the darkness itself. "It's not built," he muttered mostly to himself. "It's cultivated." Voss turned toward him, eyebrows drawn. "Sir, the symmetry is too perfect," Sevrex continued, more confident now, connecting the mental pieces one after another. "The whole curves in precise ratios we've only ever seen in biological fractals, not engineered architecture. This wasn't designed for mass production. This was made once, deliberately, and then hidden. And we found it," Voss said quietly. "By accident?" "No," Sevrex replied. "It let us." He tapped the console and brought up the trajectory. "Data from their approach. There's no gravitational pull in this sector strong enough to trap a ship of that size here. And yet it's been sitting at the perfect triangulation point between 3 uninhabited star systems, invisible from all commercial routes, shielded from long-range scans, and directly on the path of our survey arc. It was waiting for someone, and it made sure we'd be the ones to find it." A long pause followed then. Without warning, the Indomitable turned no engine flare, no change in mass reading, no kinetic output, just rotation deliberate, controlled, facing them fully now the forward side of the hull began to shift, not mechanically, but like something opening under pressure from within. Panels receded, lights flickered in a slow cascade down its side, and then a bay opened, not wide, not aggressive, just large enough for a small vessel to enter. Voss backed one step from the console. "It's inviting us in." Sevrex didn't move, his gaze locked on the opening, eyes narrowed. "Send a recon pod uncrewed, non-hostile signature. Lowest possible sensor profile." Within minutes, the drone launched, a sleek, silver-gray capsule with no weapons and minimal tech chatter, sliding smoothly across the darkness toward the waiting entry port. The bridge was silent again, all eyes fixed on the feed. The drone passed into the opening and was swallowed by the dark inside. The walls were smooth, seamless, and alive with a pale glow that followed the drone as it moved, as if the ship was watching it, guiding it deeper. No debris, no signs of decay, no exposed machinery. The walls shimmered with layered script, symbols etched in microscopic patterns, unreadable but almost reverent. The drone moved forward slowly until it reached the command chamber. There was no captain's chair, no crew terminals, no trace of life support gear. Instead, at the center stood a tall pillar, pulsing faintly, surrounded by 3 concentric rings etched into the floor, each one lined with fragments of alien code interspersed with human lettering. Voss zoomed in on the pillar and enhanced the resolution. The center was projecting a star map. It rotated slowly, hundreds of systems marked with glowing indicators, but the colors were wrong red, not for targets, but for evacuation zones. A slow breath caught in Sevrex's throat as he stepped closer to the display bus, tried to translate the coordinates. But the ship had already done it for them. The names blinked across their screens, one by one: Grohl Territory, Varnax, Prime Zarn Dominion, Core World marked red. Then the center of the map zoomed in and locked onto a point beyond known space. ARWS. It wasn't a planet, it wasn't a species, it wasn't even a region. It was a mass, gravitationally impossible, shifting across systems like a moving wound. The drone froze. A new voice echoed across the bridge. It was human male, steady and exhausted. "You're not the threat, but you're in the way." The feed cut every sensor, returned to zero. Every officer stood still, their reflections caught in the glow of the message still floating on the screen. Sevrex didn't speak. He was remembering the name. Now the Indomitable wasn't just a warship, was a shield built not to fight the galaxy, but to stand in front of something that shouldn't exist at all. The drone never came back. There was no signal loss, no interference, no physical impact, just a flatline, clean, clinical, final. as though the Indomitable had them see exactly what it wanted, and then gently remove the piece they had sent inside. Like a hand closing over a secret it had never truly intended to share, Severix stood in the middle of the operations chamber, flanked by high command staff across 4 systems, each connected through real-time data stream, their faces projected. In translucent frames hanging in the air like ghosts circling judgment. "What did it say to you?" asked Overseer Jurel from the Prime Citadel, his voice tight with suspicion, but his eyes betraying the anxiety he was trying to contain. Severix didn't answer right away. He walked to the center console, brought up the last captured audio from the Black Ship, and played it again for the room. "You're not the threat, but you're in the way." The silence that followed was not disagreement. It was the absence of anything useful to say. They had all heard it, replayed it, analyzed its vocal inflection, linguistic structure, tonal range. The voice wasn't synthetic. It was human, alive, and old, too old. That ship's been sitting in the dark longer than the Zarn have had jump gate capability. Severix finally said, keeping his voice calm, measured, because he knew what he was saying was about to break everything they thought they understood. And yet it knew our encryption methods, our language roots, our fleet classifications. It's been watching, not just us, but everything. High Technician Rao, who had overseen alien tech study protocols for over 30 cycles, leaned forward into the frame, his eyes wide behind a lattice of scanning optics. That drone's memory core was locked when it launched. There's no known method to override that kind of encoding. Even we can't access it without cutting open the physical shell. Severix tapped a button and displayed the drone's status on the shared screen. Not only did the ship get through the shell, it rewrote its registry, then wiped it clean afterward, not destroyed, just erased, like it never existed in the first place. One of the junior strategists on the call, barely of command age, exhaled a nervous laugh that cracked too loud. "You're saying the humans built a ship that can erase other machines from existence?" "No," Severix said, without looking at him. "I'm saying the humans built a ship that can decide what is allowed to exist near it." That silenced even the most skeptical of the Overseer's Voss. Standing just behind him, leaned forward slightly, watching the way Severix's tone changed. From detached observation to something deeper. "We always thought they were scattered," Voss said quietly, "after the Orion split, after they withdrew from interstellar diplomacy. We thought they fractured, fell into civil fragmentation or low-tech collapse. That was the cover," Severix replied, his voice darker now. "That was the mask they showed the galaxy while they built this." Raoul narrowed his eyes. Why? Why disappear? Why fall silent for 100 years if they had this? Severix looked up from the display. To prepare. For what? He pulled up the star map from the drone feed again and zoomed in on the core coordinates that had locked in place the moment the drone reached the Indomitable's bridge, Erebus. There was no classification, no spectral data, no planetary structure, just mass movement consumption. The sensors had only picked up gravitational wake patterns. But they weren't natural. They were directed every 30 cycles. It shifted every time it did. Another fringe system went dark. Not in violence, not with war or radio silence. Just gone empty. Whatever it is. Severix said, "It's not intelligent in the way we understand. But it isn't aimless either. It moves with intent. And the Indomitable was positioned here, between it and our populated systems, like a barrier set before something no one wanted to see reach us." "And you're certain this isn't human propaganda?" The question came from Counselor Nyril, always the one to inject politics into survival. But this time her voice lacked conviction. No human faction has ever demonstrated the ability to interface with synthetic organic matter at this scale, or manipulate deep-range drone cores through passive scan alone. Severix answered flatly, "This isn't propaganda. This is preparation." Mose tapped the side of his monitor. bringing up one last file, captured just before the drone feed. Died a brief flicker of a room. Deep beneath the Indomitable's bridge level, a chamber with no entry doors inside. Figures stood in tall, translucent stasis columns, humans, perfectly still, eyes closed, but not dead, not preserved, waiting. And in the corner of that chamber, embedded into the wall like a wound that had never healed, was a piece of something else. Not human, not Zarn. The image was corrupted, the details blurred, but something about it made every officer on the bridge lean closer, a shape, tall and twisted, partially consumed in black organic matter, fused with metal that screamed in unfamiliar geometry. Whatever it was, it had been brought aboard the Indomitable for study, or maybe for containment, and it was still there. Run the signature against. Known species. Severex ordered. They tried. They failed. It didn't match anything in galactic history. Severex turned away from the screen. He didn't speak again for a long time. Because somewhere out in the dark, past the edges of every map the XARN had ever drawn, something had started moving again, and the humans had built the black ship because they knew exactly what it was. The Council didn't believe him. Not the first time. Not after the second debrief. Not even when he played the voice log of the Indomitable in front of 60 senior strategists from across Dominion space. A voice that spoke like a ghost and a sentinel in the same breath, layered in pain and warning. Something old and human and unmistakably real. They called it a trick, an illusion, a captured signal loop designed to spread psychological dissonance. Even though they knew no species had ever intercepted Dominion data at that depth, and certainly not through a passive scan, Severex stood before them, fully composed, one hand resting on the data slab embedded in the Council floor, his other behind. His back, shoulders level, expression unreadable. They thought they were still in control. He had learned that when men and councils are afraid, they don't lean forward. They lean backward into what they know, into charts and rules and history books that hadn't prepared them for ships that rewrite drone memories, or stasis pods that hold living soldiers who hadn't aged in over 100 years. "I'm not here to persuade you," Severex said, the first words he'd spoken in 30 minutes of silence, while the Council argued over each other's doubts. "I'm here to tell you what's coming." Counselor Nyrau leaned forward, her voice sharp and careful, like a blade held close to the skin. "You're saying the humans built a warship that anticipates threat vectors, interfaces with thought level AI, and exists outside of standard matter indexing, and they've just let it drift in silence until now. Why activate it now?" Severex didn't blink, because the thing they were building it for is finally close enough to be a problem again. The room went stilly, tapped the console, and pulled up the fragmented map from the drone's final feed sector trails. Evacuation. Coordinates, red systems, and in the center of them all, a Rayboth map rotated slowly, then pulsed once, marking a Dominion border zone already flagged as low traffic due to anomalous signal disruption and gravitational lensing 3 systems. In that region had already been written off as failed colonies in the last 6 months. Not hostile takeovers, not resource depletion, just silence. 3 sectors, Severex said flatly, already gone, and we haven't even noticed because we keep sending broken ships and old tech out to scan for them. The humans haven't said a word publicly because they know exactly what this thing does to species that panic early. The central screen shifted again. Live feed. Severex had rooted the stream himself. A direct connection back to his fleet in Thorn Expanse. The Indomitable was moving, not drifting, not turning on its axis, moving toward the edge of the void. No engine flare, no propulsion, no atmospheric disturbance, just a slow, deliberate shift forward. Across the vacuum, like it had finally been given a direction, the stasis pods inside had dimmed, their light fading into deep blue pulses that moved in sequence like a heartbeat, and then the beacon activated a low-frequency pulse, clean, harmonic, embedded with layered encryption signals, human, but threaded with something else. Something no one in the room had ever seen before us stood in the transmission hub aboard Sevrex's command vessel and patched the audio through to the Council's chamber. If you're hearing this, your species has made contact with Arabis matter. It does not negotiate, it does not communicate, and it does not retaliate because it never perceives you as an enemy. It perceives you as nutrient. The air shifted, no one moved, no one, argued Counselor Rivik, normally the most aggressive voice in the room, leaned forward and muttered under his breath, "This isn't war. This is extinction protocol." Sevrex gave a single nod. That's what the Indomitable was built for. Not to attack, not to conquer, to stall, to hold the line where no species could survive long enough to build their own defense. Humanity saw it first. We ignored them because we thought they were too primitive to matter. But they weren't hiding weakness. They were buying time. Another pulse rang out from the ship, this one wider. Stronger multiple Dominion systems received it at once, and not just Zarn systems. The Varnax received it, the Groln Confederacy, the Solari Courts, even the fringe pirate networks along the abandoned gas belts. All of them heard the same message: prepare. Wasn't a call to arms, it was an instruction, a warning, and a challenge. Voss's voice came through Sevrex's com. "Low, urgent, sir. We just intercepted a burst from the Indomitable's secondary array. It's not just moving now. It's activating long-range jump coordinates to where?" Voss hesitated. "Deep void. Past charted space. Exact vector leads to an unrecorded gravity. Well, we have no logs on. We've never sent anything that far." Sevrex stared at the glowing map. The jump path went straight into the eye of the unknown. For conquest, but to meet something already coming out, he turned back to the Council. "I'm requesting full mobilization of Fleet Division 8 under temporary interspecies cooperation clause," he said without blinking. "Effective immediately." Counselor Nyril finally stood. Her voice nearly calm now. "You're going to follow the Indomitable." "No," Sevrex said, as his fleet lit up across the stars in response to his orders. "I'm going to stand behind it and see what kind of thing makes a human afraid enough to build that ship in the first place." The Indomitable vanished beyond known space 2 hours after the last transmission. No hyperlane trail, no ion wake, no quantum echo, just gone, as if the ship had never been there at all. And yet, the effect it left behind rippled like a tidal shock. Through every High Council, every military relay station, every neutral observatory, still trying to deny what the Dominion's most seasoned commander had now publicly confirmed. Humanity had never disappeared. They had simply gone quiet long. Enough to finish building their answer to the universe's real question. What do you do when something arrives that cannot be reasoned with, cannot be stopped, and doesn't even know you're alive before it consumes your entire civilization? You build the Indomitable. Sevrex stood now aboard his command ship Sovereign Spear, orbiting a neutral station off Terra 5's edge, one of the few remaining outposts still maintained by what the humans now called Earth-aligned space. Though they didn't seem particularly concerned with politics or ownership anymore, the rendezvous had been approved quietly, conditionally. No formal documents, no cameras, no flags, just a meeting. A human vessel approached, smaller than the Indomitable, but carved from the same impossible black matter, not grown to intimidate, but shaped with purpose. Every line of it suggested silence, precision, readiness. The human who stepped aboard wasn't a soldier in the traditional sense. She wore no armor, no emblems, just a dark uniform stitched with thread that shimmered like starlight, and eyes that had seen further than most species had dared to look. "I'm Commander Sevrex of the Zarn Dominion," he said, offering a traditional 2-finger gesture of respectful neutrality. She nodded once. "Call me Rena," she said, voice calm, direct, and tired in a way that couldn't be faked. They didn't shake hands. They didn't sit. There was no time for formality. I need to understand what the Arabis is. Severix Sadrina stared at him for a long time, then turned to the display behind her, bringing up a projection. It wasn't stored in any known Dominion database. It was. Wrong, the shape on the screen wasn't a ship, or a creature, or a planet. It was mass twisting, moving, unraveling, and reassembling over itself, like the universe had grown a tumor that learned to breathe. It isn't a weapon, Rena said softly. It isn't alive in the way we are, but it grows, consumes, and it spreads along the weakest parts of reality, through gravitational slipstreams and dark matter breaches. We call it the Arabis, but it probably has no concept of identity or intention. How long have you known about it? Longer than we'll admit out loud. Why didn't you warn the other species? She looked at him then, not with anger, but with something colder experience. We tried. You thought we were breaking down. You thought we were collapsing inward. But we were building behind the noise. We didn't have time to earn trust. We only had time to prepare. Severix nodded slowly, absorbing the weight of that choice. He could see it now. The pattern of human silence wasn't failure. It was insulation. They had watched other species rise and fall, squabble and conquer, while they quietly tunneled into the edge of unspace, designing not fleets, but shields, not armies, but vessels meant to stand between this galaxy and the thing clawing at its border. And now it was too late for debate, because the Indomitable had gone. Ahead, and the Arabis was moving faster. We'll need access to your scans. Your math, your materials, Severix said firmly. The Dominion can mobilize 7 systems worth of infrastructure if we move now. We just need direction. Rena nodded, and for the first time, a hint of something like relief touched her expression. We don't need your fleets to fight, she said. We need them to buy time. Severix paused. For what? She turned back to the display, where a second ship was now shown, smaller, sharper, coiled in ways that made no sense. Almost alive. It wasn't built yet. It was still forming. This one, Rena said, isn't a shield. What is it? Her voice was quiet, almost reverent. It's the blade. The screen faded to black far across the galaxy. Beyond the outer edges of any known map, the Indomitable reappeared alone, drifting slowly before a moving wall of impossible mass. The Arabis pulsed once, and the black ship turned to face it. A lone voice from within its hull whispered into the void, not for fear, not for hope, but as a record. Humanity was never first to speak, but we will be the last to fall. The war hadn't begun yet, but the line had been drawn, and the rest of the galaxy now knew which side they needed to stand on.